Warming up. Crazy weather today.
Crazy weather, crazy workload, crazy day, crazy many things. Give us a moment to get set up, but yeah, welcome.
Yeah, getting the light. Let's move that out of the way. The light. We're starting in a bit. Perils of a live stream thing. The link is shared. Okay. Feed looks good. Hopefully, once someone's in the live stream, they can confirm if our audio levels are clear.
You double check input. If I switch it.
But of course, looking at the preview image, we're brighter than before because of the black shirts.
That was yesterday's video. Tuesday's video. Hey Mitch. Sorry we're late. Long day. Unforeseen complications. Whew. Ironically, we were watching Lower Deck show before this, just to refresh. It's a fun show.
Okay. I guess we can officially start. More kulob, but audio is okay. Sound is kulob.
Why kulob?
Is the microphone the laptop and not the mic?
Yeah, I switched it because the last time when it was that, there was no audio with Restream.
We still haven't tried getting the driver. No?
Trying to look for new drivers now. I mean, like from the website. But then when I tried to do a Windows update on it, there are no available drivers.
Okay.
Yeah, sure. Okay, so we'll start. Give us a moment.
Oh yeah! Really great!
Hey, this is Toby. I couldn't see. You were clicking stuff. This is Toby.
A long gap. Ironically, the things I'm clicking is so that the title loads when the intro video finishes rolling. This is Rocky who clicks things.
And if it's not, oh my gosh, I'm out.
Try again. This Toby. This Toby.
And if it's your first time here, welcome to Baduy Pride, our little space on the internet where we talk about anything we want.
It's completely unscripted and not entirely accurate, but at least it's honest. Join us. We talk about everything and anything random live.
And if it's not your first time here, thank you so much for joining us again. It's a Thursday, so we cover fandoms, and today is a show which we actually thought we would hate. It's Star Trek Lower Decks.
Yeah. We're off to a great start. Okay. Um, so Star Trek Lower Decks is the, I guess technically the second animated series
Hmm.
in the Star Trek franchise. But it was the first one meant to be like an adult oriented one, which upon announcement, I was not sure how to feel about it. Only
Mm-hmm.
because I mean like, I, as a long time, for me particularly, for a long time Star Trek fan, um I mean Star Trek's very serious. And then I don't know if like there was that much of a demand for a comedy show. Um what
I'm a
more an
bit scared of the
animated
show.
one? And it was just worried that it could be super like super what you call this? Uh Sort of Rick and Morty
Mm-hmm.
but Star Trek or something. And then the only name attached to it was Mike
McMahon,
McMahon, who is like also a writer and producer on Rick and Morty. So
but
that's
has also
why
worked on Drawn Together, South
South Park.
Park.
So it's a bunch of like, it's a bunch of and something called Solar Opposites, which ironically I've never seen, but so it's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of strange geeky adult humor stuff. And I
Mm-hmm.
like Rick and Morty, but I don't associate it with like um uh the Star Trek audience. Okay, I'm going to have to load right now if you want to show
Yeah,
ano.
just so that we have some visuals on what we're talking about. IMDb. Ah, okay.
Okay, maybe. Uh, yeah, one moment, Mitch. So yeah.
Yeah, there. So at least you can see that.
Okay.
So when we first heard about it, we were wondering why, you know, why have such a comical approach to Star Trek?
Mm-hmm.
When prior to this, we had Discovery, which was pretty good,
Yeah, although it also took us a while to
hmm
like fully warm up to.
and then prior to Discovery,
We haven't really had Trek in a while. The last was
um,
Enterprise.
yeah, and the movies, which are their own universe. So we already felt defensive in the sense that the movies felt like, oh, they're trying to make it grittier
Oh, the
and more
the the
realistic.
Abrams era
Yeah.
movies. Yeah, yeah.
So when Discovery came in, there was that initial, I'm not sure where I feel, but then as it progressed, oh, it's starting to feel like the Trek we like.
Sometime after the when you get through the first half of Discovery season one, the
Mm-hmm.
second half starts to feel better. But it still took a while to like for me to really say that okay, I like Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to give Lower Deck a chance. But it was just this feeling of why am I gonna get into this adult comedy cartoon?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it also just shows that we've never really seen like a serious comedic effort throughout. I mean, there are like little one-liners and jokes. Maybe there are in-universe jokes, um, or you could probably get close to it with things like the original animated series, which was based on like Kirk and crew
Mm-hmm.
from the original Trek, was also like much lighter in tone because it was meant for like a
But
afternoon audience
bite-sized episodes.
and very kid oriented. So then you just had a lot of quirky
Mm-hmm.
humor, very slapstick at times. But that was about it. So um yeah, and then because whenever it's a new show, I try not to personally I try not to read into it too
Mm-hmm.
much to avoid spoilers. Then we just knew that it was a comedy about sort of a not main ship in the Star Trek universe, and then it kind of went from there. So I think I didn't even rush. We didn't even rush to watch the pilot.
Mm-hmm.
I think, but it was like after the first few episodes, there were a lot of like interesting social media mentions and really uh, a lot of effort to like dissect some of the stuff in the background and
Mm-hmm.
the little Easter eggs, and then okay, then maybe there's more to this, and then we eventually watch the show. So, what was like your first impressions when we got through the very first episode?
So I was worried how comedic it would be because I guess I already started to really like Discovery
Mm-hmm.
and how the stakes were there and how um, the 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 science was plausible enough for you to start imagining the possibilities,
Yeah.
and that's what I think good science fiction helps you, reach that point. So when we started seeing some of the artwork, there was that, oh, so it's gonna be kind of slapsticky comedy, which is odd. But then when we um, started to see who was behind it, and there were, the connections to Rick and Morty, there was that, okay, maybe it won't be that bad because Rick and Morty is very smart.
Rick and Morty. Yeah,
It's
Rick
a
and Morty,
very intelligent cartoon,
quite brilliant
but it was also very crass,
and very, yeah, very irreverent
and
in that
and
sense.
that was something which we were now worried about. About, oh no, is Trek now going to be all about stupid sex jokes?
Yeah, yeah. There's definitely like very lowbrow toilet humor that permeates the shows that McMahon
Hmm.
has been
And
associated
it's
with.
not that it's bad. It's just that
It's just very
it
different,
felt very different for Trek.
very not, very not what we know as to be Trek. But to
Hmm.
be fair, like the jump, I mean, like there's always been several leaps in like Star Trek history,
Hmm.
and in terms of the show progression, just getting from Next Generation to Deep Space Nine, there was quite the uproar in the fan community because what, we're gonna be on a space station and not a
Hmm.
ship, things like that. So every time they change, they kind of present a new angle, but they also change things. Then there's always reason for fans to be upset and angry. So that's that. There, I mean, it had a lot going against it, but at the same time, I've learned to just try to keep an open mind, and then especially since like, which is like how I felt like when we started watching Discovery, where it doesn't feel like my Trek,
Hmm.
but we haven't had Trek in so long, so let's go for it.
Hmm.
And then we just kept watching. And then by the time that Lower Decks came out, it was part of this long string of like, oh my god, we're gonna have so many weeks of Trek
Hmm.
because each show debuted one after the other. Like, it was
Yeah.
like the new season of Discovery, and then Lower Decks, and then Picard, and there's a lot going on again in the Star Trek universe. So, but yeah, then you get Lower Decks, and yeah, sorry, go you go.
I guess part of the apprehension for me was initially what turned me off from Discovery was it felt like it was one person story.
Mm,
For a show with such an ensemble cast, it was always about her and about her and about
season
her,
one did feel
and
very heavy
and
Burnham.
it was very. I'm tired of her now. I want to know more about the crew, which thankfully they did.
Overtime.
They did over time spread out and tell the stories of the different characters. And despite the fact that she still, even in the later seasons, is so perfect in so many ways, um, the others do have their moments to shine.
Are you saying Burnham is a bit of a Mary Sue?
Um, I don't know. Maybe she's the only one left. um, Now, with Picard, it was strange because Picard almost suffered in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But in a way, that was what we wanted because it is Picard.
It was
The show
a
literally is
it was
his
an
name.
effort to like run a continuation of like the next generation
Mhm.
movies Picard that we had gotten used to, and I think on that note it delivered, but it was also very new territory to some
Mm-mm.
degree.
And then it suffered in the other way around, wherein the show was trying to then talk about all these people, including the guy who's pretty much an elf with swords. Um, but you just wanted to know more about Picard, and you just wanted more focus on him.
Mm,
So
mm,
when
mm.
this show came out, it was hard to know what to expect, and it was quite interesting how it feels slightly buddy cop, but it still feels like a good ensemble cast. And if anything, if there's only one thing that makes the show work, is the fact that it's such a love letter to Trek.
Yeah. And I think that's the one thing that helped me through the first episode. Because the first episode's still a little rough. It's still very like
Rick and Morty guesting in a Trek
I guess it's a
universe.
lot of like it's a lot of there are a lot of references, but then like it we weren't sure like where it was really going. I mean, even just the opening with um the whole box of contraband, which
Mm.
is like Easter egg full, but then like what kind of Starfleet is
Yeah,
this?
so I can like flick through images while we're talking about the episode. Just so there's visuals about the show.
Oh, okay. I'm going to have to
Yeah.
load this again.
Sayang eh. There's a lot of things to see. Yeah, I can be the one to handle it. Photos there.
And you can start on page 2 because page 1 is just one image. Uh,
Hmm?
hmm? No, because I looked at it earlier. Then page 2 is like weird. Page 3 is like one image. That's what I'm saying.
Mm,
Anyway, yeah. So I've lost my train of thought. Where do you wanna move?
yeah, I was gonna do the mouse. Anyway, okay, go now.
No, here. It
So anyway, so yeah, so you were talking about the first episode, how it had the contraband, which had a lot of Easter eggs, but it still felt very Rick and Morty, and how eventually it started to grow on you.
And I think the defining moment, which kind of makes sense, is that the way they approached. I guess you feel it more when they approach the rest of the supporting cast. So in this case, our engineer and our science officer, um, is that it kind of implies that the Federation is filled up with a bunch of nerds. I mean,
Mm,
like, and it makes sense because when you think about the Star Trek universe, where there is no there's no, it's not a capitalist society.
yeah,
So it is an enlightened society that has an economy, but
we,
it doesn't require like
we
wages.
don't know how they reached that point,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
that's not the point of the show.
We don't know how it survives, but then people join Starfleet because they want to, like they
Mm,
feel this something sense of duty, whatever. And so you get a lot of people in the cast who are like people who just love what they're doing. So your engineer character just super loves being in Jeffrey's shoes, and your science medical track person is super excited to be dealing with people like potentially near death, and it's fun. And I think in that sense it that's when it felt like more with the fans than making fun of the
mm-hmm,
fandom, because it's all about people who love being in Trek.
mm-hmm. Now, given the title itself, Lower Decks, the main focus is not the main crew of the ship, but rather, lack of a better word, the interns who are in the lower part of the ship handling the more menial tasks.
So, which is funny because it's also like in runs in parallel to the Next Generation. In the seventh season, there is an episode that is called Lower Decks,
Mm-hmm.
which is precisely about these sorts of people on the ship. So they're not the bridge crew. They're still technically, all in the officer track. They're all ensigns, and then maybe one day they'll get promoted.
Mm-hmm.
And then it just focused on those stories instead of the senior crew, and even the perspective of how these officers look at the senior crew and stuff. And it was definitely such a breath of fresh air as far as a Star Trek went. And then uh so when I think that was one of the things that kind of helped the show is like when they announced that it's called Lower Decks, and a lot of people were thinking like, oh my god, so it's going to be more of those stories. And that's
Mm-hmm.
fairly true, that you are dealing with junior officers. Actually, not even, they're mostly just ensigns, and then we're exploring their stories. Mitch is asking who are the leads. Okay, so I don't know if we should go back to that picture,
The
but
group shot,
this still
yeah.
works. So, um, was this in terms of your primary cast? You're dealing with these four people from the supporting group. So on the far right is Boimler, who is because he's wearing red, he's on the command track, and then he is all by the book.
Mm-hmm.
So he is
He's the nerd in
he's
the
the
show.
super nerd trying to do his best, and that's about it. And then his sort of polar opposite on the left side is Mariner, who is um, competent but cocky. And
Mm-hmm.
then clearly that she has been demoted to be back at this level. So that quickly on you determine that she has a greater skill set than she lets on,
Yes.
but is such a screw up. So she's like literally here getting them all to drink on shift, and then
Mm-hmm.
just trying to mess things up. And so naturally they antagonize one another. You have Tendi, who is the Orion in part of the medical track. So because he's wearing blue, that's medical or
Mm-hmm.
science. And then you have Rutherford as the engineer, who has a new cyborg implant for some reason. They don't explain why, which is like a reference to things like in the Next Generation, there was Geordi LaForge
Hmm.
who had his visor and stuff. And so there's a long history of like weird implants in the Star Trek universe. Um, and then yeah, so he juggles with that, and that's like this is your primary cast. This is
Hmm.
your main crew that you follow along, and there's still like the rest of the crew. There's the captain, the first officer, and all that. All the tropes of the Star Trek world, and um, then you get to, but you follow the story mainly from the perspective of these four
Yeah.
characters.
There.
Okay.
This is the
This
main
is
crew.
this is the bridge crew essentially. And so the captain's in the middle. You have the tactical officer on the far left. You have the lead engineer. You have the second in command, and the doctor. Yes, is a cat. It's a thing. It's a Kaishan. If you watch Star Trek the animated series, there is literally this cat humanoid member of the bridge crew.
Hmm.
Morris. Yeah, I forgot the name right. Thank you. All
Hmm.
right, Morris as the original one.
So part of what I really like about the visual style of the show is that they were able to capture the feel that it was the classic look,
Mm-hmm.
but you still feel there's a certain level of modernness to how they all look.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the hairstyles are a nice mix of modern cuts to futuristic cuts and still homages to older styles. The uniforms are beautifully done.
Mm.
And then they have all the opportunity to make fun of some of the other uniforms as need be. Everything from how one of them looks like a dress and this and that, and how it's ceremonial. And I really like that touch because in many ways that's one of the things that we were very frustrated about with the movie and in some ways with Discovery.
Mm.
Na wala eh. With technology moving forward, you can't stay in the old look.
Well, with production,
Yeah,
modern
yeah, with
television
modern.
production
Mm,
technology moving forward, yeah, then you and then the fact that Discovery is supposed to be in a time period older than the very first Star Trek series,
mm.
then it doesn't make sense. Like, why touch screens?
Why is everything holographic
And
in that
then
way?
and then later on in the first Star Trek series, you have literal physical buttons on the ship. And surprisingly, there's a book that explains this. But anyway, that's just crazy.
Battlestar Galactica tried to make sense of it in the sense that oh, the rest of the place is high tech. It's just that Galactica is an old ship, and
Yes.
it's still more analog because of how it survived this and that in the past. So that was a nice way they sidestepped that question. In Picard, it's the future of
It's the
the
future of the future,
so
so
it
it's
kind of
okay.
makes sense.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
Discovery was the oddball there,
Yeah, yeah.
and we kept watching Discovery before with the thought of maybe they're gonna reach this point where they'll shut everything down, and that's why everything will look like the past technology. Well, the show surprised us where they went.
But if you know, if you're curious, if you read the books based on the Star Trek Enterprise series, especially when you get to the Romulan War,
Hmm.
they try to sneak in an explanation why even Star Trek Enterprise, the TV series, look more advanced than Star Trek the original series. So they snuck in a justification for like
Mm.
weird buttons, and it's plausible. It's plausible. It sounds like a Battlestar Galactica solution. I'll,
Hmm.
I'll just leave it at that. Okay. But yeah, so the very first episode, uh, I think it started to win me over when you have things like people talking about how they love the warp core
Hmm.
and what it sounds like, and it's like, oh my god, it's the little things. It's the little things that you continue to celebrate about the show. It's like why people like Star Trek, and
Hmm.
then um, and you kind of go from there.
It also helped that since we were talking about the people in the lower decks, they were in many ways fans of the people who were doing the jobs or who were in
Yes.
the higher places. So they became the perfect vehicles for the fans of the show. They would talk about references which fans would pick up on, or they would pick on or joke about details which fans talked about from years ago. It was such an opportunity to make the fans part of the experience.
Nope, this season two. Yeah, then I think it's sort of like when we think about things like Galaxy Quest, where Galaxy Quest is not a Star Trek
Mhm.
is not a Star Trek show, but it's clearly written by people who like enjoyed Star Trek and then wanted to make a comedy
Mhm.
sort of about it. And then to some initially there was that worry that it's kind of laughing at the fans.
Mhm.
Again, there was that always that fear that are you gonna mock the fandom? But in the end, Galaxy Quest is often celebrated as one of the best like
Star Trek, non-Star Trek,
non
Star
Star
Trek,
Trek Star
Star
Trek
Trek,
movies because it
and
celebrates the sort of the love of the Star Trek
and
fandom.
in many ways, it's more Trek than the movies were. Than
The new movies,
the
the
yeah the
Abrams
Abraham
movies.
movies were.
Yeah.
So it also succeeds where I feel Big Bang Theory failed. At the start, Big Bang Theory was about, being a geek and laughing at people who don't get why being a geek is awesome.
Hmm.
And this show is so far, it looks like it's making fun of Star Trek, but you realize it's celebrating the quirks and the joys of being into Star Trek. Why the universe makes so much sense in its irreverence. Um, and if you don't get it, it still works. Like in my case, I'm not that huge a fan, and there are references I don't quite catch, but it still in itself makes sense in the context of the scene that's unfolding. So it's very, very well written.
So as you get through that, I think, and I was just telling Toby earlier, it's like I think you it totally wins me over by episode 3, and it's a
Mm.
10 episode series for season 1. Um, but by episode 3, it's super. It starts off already like this huge wink at the fandom, and then you kind of go from there. And just to like to set it up very briefly is you have it's the picture earlier about them drinking margaritas, and I'm not gonna
Hmm.
bother swing back, but
Yeah.
um uh basically they talk about how since people don't really know like how long it officially takes to finish anything in the Star Trek universe, so to speak. People can just quote time frames of what they want to do and like or how long it's gonna take to do something. So like, hey, how long it take to fix this panel? Then you give 2 hours, and they in the show in the episode they called it buffer time, but which is in itself a reference to like in the original series there sorry in Next Generation they featured an episode that had Scotty from the original series. He was the engineer, and he talked about how because they always called him a miracle worker because he would always like pull things out of like a hat at the last minute
Hmm.
to save the crew. But he said he totally buffered his estimates
Hmm.
so that he could always over deliver
So parang
versus what
it'll
he
take
said.
3 days, but he'll finish it in one because
Yeah,
he actually knew he could finish it in one, but he overestimated. So others.
I mean, it was already fun when like that was codified in Next Generation
Hmm.
as a fact. And then to have an episode that starts with reminding us that hey, we totally accept this thing as true, and then in universe, the officers also know this to be true and are also padding their time. It oh my god, and the way that this it could have just been a one-off throwaway
Hmm.
joke, but then later on it how they deal with buffer time becomes a part
Oops.
of thing. You're
Sorry.
moving my
Yeah,
mouse.
yeah. I'm moving the wrong one. Sorry, sorry.
Okay, but yeah, so how that came together. And it's like, oh my god, this is awesome. And
Hey,
I
Jess.
did. And just as you progress through it there's just more and more like deep Trek lore
Hmm.
brought into it, and it just becomes even more entertaining. And my gosh, by the end it's like it's amazing, and I can't wait for the second season and all that.
The show also has fantastic moments of both science and action. Um, Even if you don't really feel that they're in any danger whatsoever, the action scenes are still well done. The choreography is fun. The way they utilize, whether it's tactics or tools in their fights, is always interesting to watch. I love, I love also how um, they try to make sure that the fights still tell the story and they're not just fight sequences.
Mm.
Everything from they were losing at one point, but then when they start realizing they can destroy stuff, they start doing better. And it's little nods again to how the stories feel when you're watching the shows and we're watching different episodes.
Oh, and we didn't bring this up earlier. I think it's important to explain the setup also is that as much as it's like very much set in the classic like
Mhm.
existing Star Trek universe. I mean like it connects to the TNG Voyager side of things and not so much Discovery.
Mhm.
And then what made it more awesome is that the Cerritos, our hero ship of the episode, number one, is not a pretty ship
Mhm.
because it's a workhorse ship. It's the ships that are in the background that help keep the Federation going. And then if you watch any of the main Star Trek shows, then there's always a talk about exploring strange new worlds, and
Mhm.
thus very often the Enterprises as the flagship of Starfleet would be out there making first contact with new
Mhm.
species. They're the first, members of the Federation to meet these other races. Whereas in lower deck, their main specialty as a ship, as a crew, is second contact, which
Mhm.
is, hey, you're now part of our great organization. Here's the paperwork.
Mhm.
Here's all the stuff. Here's the logistics. Let's deliver gifts. So they're super a second line ship. They're, oh my God.
Which works with the title because the
Yes.
lower decks concept is not just the crew, the main characters, but also the fact that the ship itself is like, we won't have you for the main event. Go here instead to deliver the gift, or go here instead to collect the paper documents, and
Which is
it's a lot of the
so
menial tasks.
funny. I mean, like, so as much as the bridge crew kind of holds themselves above the
Mhm.
rest of the crew, but in terms of like the greater Starfleet, they're all just the sad ship versus hero ships like the Enterprise or
and
the
that's
Titan.
and that's so perfectly captured by the intro sequence,
Yes.
which has, I think, so far it's the best intro for the stuff that have come out, since, I guess, what, since, oh my gosh, since Voyager.
You particularly like the Voyager
No,
intro.
I mean, after Voyager, the rest of the intros weren't for me as striking until this one, because this one feels
Why?
classic.
It's been a long road.
Is that after Voyager one?
Yeah.
Oh, I thought that was before Voyager.
No,
I'm so
no.
sorry. I thought Voyager was like the last one. Oh, you're right. Enterprise. Okay, so
Been a
Enterprise.
long road.
Enterprise still works. Well, the earlier Enterprise version,
We're big fans of the season one, season two intro theme, and
not the
after that tweak by season three,
not
it
the
was like,
faster one.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, okay, okay.
Yeah, but then this one brings us back to classic, but still has nods to feel. You can almost feel how it's referencing certain other theme songs.
Yeah, and I think even just the sort of visual treatment or like the choice of shots in the intro really set you up for like what the show is gonna be.
Mm.
It doesn't show actual sequences from like the episode. It
Not
doesn't show the characters.
not like Rick and Morty.
Like most Trek intros, it features the hero ship
Mhm.
like traveling through space. But you have comedic twists or little things like there's literally a bit in the opening sequence where the Borg are engaged in a pitched battle with the Romulans. The Cerritos gets hit once and they're like on the periphery of the battle and then they turn away because it's beyond their pay grade and they gotta leave. And oh my god, so little things like that, even earlier in the that's like there's a park where they're just there, there's a beautiful black hole in the background a la Gravity, and then it's starting to suck in the Cerritos and then they recover and escape. But all these things I love the details, so it evokes a lot of the sort of emotions of what makes Trek intros,
Mhm.
but then keeps it its own. So yeah, from start to finish, there's a lot of good stuff going
The cast is a wonderful mix of personalities. Well, as expected in a Star Trek series with a large cast, you'd have someone who's more the science guy, someone who's, the smart, intelligent person, someone who's more combat oriented. Here, you kind of have who's good at what slowly revealed as the series goes along, and
on.
it's fun reveals. It's nice unexpected moments. The personalities are distinct. Even if you might not catch the names that easily, you'll still be able to remember who's good at what, or who's what this person's role is in the story. It's only now in the second watch that I'm realizing there's always that one guy in the towel.
Yes, yes, running gags. running gags. They make a show go round.
Mhm.
So I guess then important questions is obviously there. So as for existing Star Trek fans, depending on wherever you are from the fandom, there is a lot to love
Mhm.
about the show. There is so much detail worked into things that there's just constantly bringing in um, references to elements from all across of Star Trek history,
Mhm.
and I love this fact. So this is something that doesn't necessarily do anything for the casual viewer, but then as you know the high geeky fandom, um, then you can get super excited even just over like a certain piece of writing in the background
Mhm.
or a few seconds of a particular character because it's an alien race that was only featured in that one episode in the animated series. So
Mhm.
it has a lot of that going for it. But then I ask you then but then for what do you think? How would you say for people who aren't into Star Trek? Um, is Lower Deck still something to watch?
Yeah, it still is. As I mentioned earlier, the stories are still um, communicated well enough that you can grasp what's going on, even if you're not that huge a fan of the series. Um, it's how the show makes sure it tells you enough so you can grasp what the narrative is in case you didn't quite get the reference.
Hmm.
And then sometimes the reference is early. Oh, we're speaking to the Ganyang alien race, and they're known for blah 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 blah. But sometimes it's used as the comic moment we're in. Oh, we're dealing with that, and then later on, what? Didn't you remember? They're into this and that, and the normal fans, the fans of the
Hey,
series,
Nico.
would have already anticipated that and already were laughing about it. But then for those who aren't, you still find it as a good punchline moment when it's revealed.
So then at least for like non Star Trek people, then the internal logic of the show
Still
works.
moves, yeah.
The jokes have the proper like setup and
Mm,
reveal,
mm,
and then that works out. So that's good. Then um I guess the other question I have, and I lean to Toby more because Toby has been like part of my Star Trek education program ever since we got together. So I've been
mm.
slowly like bringing him into more and
Yeah,
more.
soon it'll be Rocky's horror and the inducement series, like 4 years of horror.
We've been together for almost a dozen years, and we haven't finished all of Trek. So good luck getting to the horror point.
It's
But
okay. There's a lot of Nightmare on Elm Street movies to go through.
I can only sort of watch the first one
Don't worry,
because
the rest are bad.
yeah, because
But I love the one where you
because
had Dream Warriors and one of them was a wizard because he played D&D. Anyway,
I was just into like was it was Johnny Depp was in the first one, right?
yes,
And then he gets eaten in the bed.
he gets eaten by the bed.
Yeah, but he was kind of hot.
Yeah.
Okay, so um my other question then is like, what if for someone who hasn't watched Star Trek before, is Lower Decks the kind of show that might get people curious about the rest of Trek?
I think so. Because, okay, Rick and Morty works despite not having a franchise behind it to latch
Mm.
onto.
It's a totally
Because the
original concept. Yeah.
science, the jokes and the science are, they handshake nicely.
Mm.
And I've even known office mates who aren't sci-fi fans, but they love how Rick and Morty makes sense.
I like Rick and Morty, sort of like Community before it because similar creative team,
Mm,
but it has thematic episodes that celebrate certain quirks that aren't
yeah.
necessarily just science fiction. It's like
Yes.
you have the time travel episode, you
Mm-mm.
have the bottle episode in the house or
Mm-mm.
whatever, and those kind of make it a little easier to understand
They,
and
they
to
give you a they give you a familiar, I
hook
guess. Yeah.
a point to latch on with. Yeah.
Now, lower decks is a bit trickier because the hook is a Trek reference,
Yes.
but they again try to make sure you grasp what the reference is. So like there's an episode where they have to be the in lack of a better word, the escorts of a Klingon.
Mm.
A non-fan might wonder what's the point, why all the stress, but they kind of do explain it that I have to practice the language and they tend to be quite violent and this and that way. So you sort of have enough to know what's going on. You don't quite get all the jokes, but you still get enough of the physical comedy to make up for not getting some of the smarter jokes.
Yeah, and then like given it's like bite-sized Trek. I mean, like it's a sitcom
Hmm.
format series, so it's about 20 minutes per episode. Then it's definitely a lot easier to jump into versus like if you want to get anyone to commit to like mainline
Hmm.
classic Star Trek, um, then it's a 40 plus minute experience. Especially, and it always starts with a 2 episode pilot.
Hmm.
It's just like it's such an investment of brain power, and it's not always easy. And I think it's like almost universal that uh, pilot episodes of Trek are rarely the strongest
Yeah.
episodes of the show run. I think the the standouts in that area are probably things like Enterprise, where it had a very good hook.
Yeah, I don't
Um,
even know why those are their pilots. I mean, even Firefly, the first episode that was used as the pilot was
oh,
not the first episode they shot.
yeah, yeah.
Because your pilot, you usually choose the strong one to try to get
The
people in.
exciting
So
one.
I don't know why this one doesn't seem to follow that approach. I do feel though that Lower Decks, in many ways, has liberated gamers who will want to run Star Trek stories
Oh, and then like keep
because
it
now they
lighter.
realize they can have fun with those stories and still capture the feeling of
And
the
by
show.
gamers, you're referring to tabletop
Yeah.
RPG gamers. I mean, like there's definitely a certain culture that is often perpetuated because of D&D that
Mm.
you have players notorious for not taking things seriously. But yeah, I get that angle. That Lower Decks kind of celebrates that. Like it's still like very 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 casual, very natural,
Mhm.
very human.
I
Uh,
even feel it sidesteps the problem we were having with, oh my gosh, what was that other show again? Where I literally told you, oh look, it's the modern character. Because you had that
mm,
woman speaking super modern day humor. And sure enough, we knew Rolling as a show.
wait, I'm just like we just watched this, and
Yeah,
then
yeah, we literally just watched this. Uh, I can't remember. Anyway, but yeah,
sorry.
but you have a lot of shows now we're in, even if it's set in a period or even
Oh,
if
oh,
it's
it's a He-Man Revelation.
He-Man. There you go.
He-Man Revelation.
You had what's her name, the friend of Tila,
Yeah,
who
yeah.
was super, not Valley Girl, but super modern day girl reactions to everything.
Mm-mm.
You have people worrying about magic and stuff, and she was almost like the girl who'd go, well, let's just hit the mall. It was almost like she was that person in that
Let's
world for some
hit
reason.
the mall.
And Lower Decks avoids that because they all still sound like they're in the world, even if they're like, let's just go drink instead, or let's just play in the band. It doesn't feel the modern day version of slacking. It still feels like the Trek universe version of slacking,
Mm-mm.
and that's
Mm-mm.
what I really appreciate about it.
Yeah, there's a very strong internal consistency that
Hmm.
makes sense, and it makes sense just for the show. It makes sense for the fandom as a whole. I mean, like to some degree, every Star Trek fan eventually will be able to associate with some of the behaviors
Mm.
about the characters in Lower Decks, because in many ways, the Lower Decks crew are the fans, are the people who are so
Yes.
immersed in the lore, who so celebrate the show so much that they know this and that, and then and are able to kind of run through it. So it's a lot of the charm. And Easter eggs galore.
So beyond Lower Decks, there are other upcoming Star Trek shows.
Yeah, well, the main one of interest, which is a heard of a similar tone, is that there is a CGI animated Nickelodeon show called Star Trek Prodigy, which is another one of those. When it was first announced, I had that feeling of, do I need this? Do I need a super kiddie oriented
Mm-hmm.
Star Trek? But after Lower Decks, I definitely walked away with the feeling of, okay, maybe there's room for more ways of telling Trek stories,
Mm-hmm.
more ways of celebrating the universe.
Although,
And
admittedly, we still don't know how to feel about it for sure. I mean,
well,
we're
at least you gotta watch it.
yeah.
I mean, like I'm not at a point where I'm gonna prejudge it and say like I don't. I'm not gonna watch Kitty Trek.
I guess it's just so we've been burned in Star Wars because there's Rebellion, which was just the
Resistance.
Resistance, which was sad.
Yeah, that was hard to get through.
Um,
Still haven't finished watching it.
but then Bad Batch is in many ways sort of like what Lower Decks is doing. We're in it's a different take on the franchise, but it still feels very in universe.
Although it's not like universally popular. Also,
Yeah.
it has its friction points. I
Well,
would
it's
say.
because for many people they see the penguins.
But no, you see the penguins. You're the only one I have ever encountered who has compared the Bad Batch to the Madagascar
Post
penguins.
a tweet and you'll see them all appear.
You have to be the one to tweet it because I'm not gonna put that on my account. So no. All right.
But they match.
That is distinctly a Toby opinion.
Okay. So with the upcoming Prodigy, it's Cartoon Network? Nickelodeon.
Nickelodeon.
Nickelodeon. So what do you think though? What do you expect it will be like? Or what are you hoping it will be like?
I don't know. I mean, like they finally had a trailer ish for it, and then it's literally a bunch of kids who seem to stumble across a Federation ship,
Mm-hmm.
and then so it feels like Janeway is going to be a computer program
Mm-hmm.
or some sort of hologram story that it will teach them how to be how to crew the ship or how to run the ship. So it's definitely going to be like a sort of growing up, coming of age type thing with very very diverse people. But beyond that, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, I'm still gonna want to see it. I love Janeway. I'm a big Voyager fan, so then I'd want to see how this old Janeway character reference whatnot will do. But beyond that, it's hard to say. I mean, like the trailer, we only had like a teaser trailer. It doesn't really give you a lot to go on. Um, the ship looks cute. I guess I go that far. What are your thoughts?
I guess I'm hoping that this is their attempt to try to do another Korra or another Avatar. We're in it's a cartoon that works for kids, but actually is smart enough for adults.
That may be a tall order.
Yeah, I know, but you know, um, Avatar did not talk down to its viewers. It wasn't afraid to explore larger concepts, and then they've been having generally they've been generally noticing a success in similar shows, Adventure Time, Steven Universe, Owl House. So a part of me is really hoping that this will be one of those, because if it's closer to, let's say, Thundercats Go,
We also haven't watched
or Teen Titans Go,
that. No,
then I'd be very worried.
I don't know if it's gonna go that young, but it from the first look trailer, it definitely feels younger than an Avatar
Mhm.
aimed audience. I don't know. That's just me.
The door open.
Air pressure. Mitch is asking if the show available on Disney Plus. So Lower Decks is actually in the US. It's on the exclusive like CBS streaming platform. But outside, like in places like Philippines, you can watch all episodes on Prime Video, owned by Amazon. That's PrimeVideo.com, which is different from clicking Amazon Prime inside the Amazon website. But at least you can watch it there. And then we should get the second season. They also carry Picard, so then that's two different Star Trek shows that you can celebrate on a platform. Admittedly, I put a pause on our Amazon Prime subscription because was just I don't we don't watch a lot, but then I may come back because it's Lower Decks time, and then like oh I'll sign
Mhm.
up because the new season's coming out, and that's it. Lower Decks definitely feels like I love it enough that yes, I'm going to want to make sure we get to watch new episodes as they become available in the region. All right. Um. Yeah. So I guess that's like that's already a lot that we can
Yeah,
cover about Lower Decks. Any last points for you?
I hope it continues. I hope
Mm.
it doesn't end with the second season.
Mm.
Because I think a large part of the advantage it has is since it's animated, they really can push the envelope.
Yes.
They really can tell a lot of stories that would have normally been out of reach budget wise.
Mm. Mm.
Um, I do hope they pull in more cameo appearances because let's face it, if the voice still generally sounds the same, animated characters of original people is still cheaper than digitally making people younger.
Hey, we know already that from the full trailer for season 2, we are getting Tom Paris's
Mhm.
voice on a plate, which in itself is
Another
it's
reference.
such a deep fan reference to these darn commemorative plates. I mean, like, who wants to own a commemorative plate? Apparently, a lot of people. So, yeah. So I have very high hopes. I agree. I hope it continues on. It's sort of like the logic. If you go back to like Star Trek, the animated series when it
Mhm.
first came out, and it's total like filmation. We're using the same running sequence over and over. But what was great about that show also is that they got to explore non-human
Mhm.
characters. So things like Emrys, the first Kaishan, and then they had oh my god, what was his name? The three-armed guy on the bridge.
Mhm.
So they got to have more non-human aliens on the crew because it was an animated show, and then they had crazy things like force belts,
Mhm.
force field, life support belts that let them fly, protect them in the vacuum of space and whatever. But it was campily fun, and
I think
and
that's for the Legion copy that I did.
and then so this show still has that potential, and
Mhm.
already it's been crazy for the sheer number of alien races they get to feature, the number of things they get to hide in the backgrounds of shots, that different pieces of lore or
Mhm.
different just artifacts, weapons, decals. There's so much going on. So yeah, it's a lot of love. It's a lot of
I
love.
would love to see an episode where they have I don't know, cameos across all the other shows.
Mm,
Because
mm.
since it's animated, you basically can recreate scenes from all the other shows and have them inserted in. So like I don't know, maybe a Q like episode or something, but then it's all these animated sequences of scenes from the different movies, scenes from the different series, scenes from I mean even the Abrams movies. And then they're like in the background of that scene unfolding, but then you'll notice, wait a minute, that's the fight scene with
That could be cool.
so I would love that if I would love them to use that sort of an advantage and you know, just have fun with it.
Yeah. So okay, so that's our hopes for Star Trek Lower Decks. On the whole, I think it's a show where they're laughing with you and not at you,
Hmm.
as far as fans are go. It's a show that definitely shows a lot of love for Star Trek as a generational franchise.
Mm-mm.
And I hope that maybe our little discussion will get more people excited about it,
Yes.
get more people willing to tune in, and there's time. It's a short 10 episode season. You can watch the whole thing in a weekend and still be ready for the premiere of season 2, which is later this month. Okay. Ah, Mitch, you think it's interesting? Yay, you think it's interesting. All right. But yeah, that's our episode for today.
That's all the time we have for this episode. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We hope you had a good time because we did, and we hope you'll join us again next time.
For questions or suggestions for future episodes, you can fill up the Google form at bit.ly Baduy Pride Ideas. You can follow us on Twitter, Altobi No Shade, RG Suniko.
You could also check out our blog, baduipride.com, for all the previous episodes and stuff about us.
So feel free to leave your uh, comments below and let us know what you think about what we talked about. Have you watched the show? Are you a Star Trek fan and you found a lot of fun for it? Then celebrate with us in the comments, and be sure to subscribe for notifications, whether Facebook or YouTube, so you don't miss our next live stream. Once again, I'm Rocky,
And I'm Toby.
and
And
this
this
is
is Baduy
Baduy
Pride.
Pride.